Uber driver gave me 1 star for living in the ghetto until he discovered I owned the entire apartment complex. Marcus picked me up outside the downtown courthouse at 6:30 p.m., immediately wrinkling his nose when I climbed into his pristine BMW with paint-stained work clothes and mud on my boots. I'd been overseeing renovation work at one of my properties all day, but Marcus saw only what he wanted to see, another broke passenger from the rough side of town who probably couldn't afford a decent tip. "Where to?" he asked with barely concealed disgust, already typing complaints into his phone about having to pick up these types of customers. When I gave him the address on Riverside Drive, his entire demeanor shifted from indifferent to hostile. "Man, I hate going to that area," he muttered while starting the GPS route with obvious reluctance. "That's straight hood territory. You better not be planning anything stupid because I've got cameras recording everything." His judgment intensified as we drove, with Marcus launching into unsolicited commentary about neighborhood property values and crime statistics. Marcus's discrimination escalated into a full lecture about personal responsibility while we sat in traffic, explaining how people who lived in areas like that made poor life choices that led to their circumstances. "I grew up poor too, but I worked hard to get out," he announced while gesturing at his luxury vehicle's interior. "Instead of complaining about the system, I educated myself and built something better." His voice dripped with condescension as he detailed his success story, making sure I understood the difference between ambitious people like himself and those who accepted living in substandard housing. When I tried changing the subject, Marcus interpreted my silence as shame about my address. "Look, I'm not judging you personally, but facts are facts," he continued while recording his thoughts for what he claimed was a podcast about urban sociology. "These neighborhoods stay rough because residents don't demand better for themselves." The situation reached its peak when Marcus pulled into the Riverside Drive complex and immediately started complaining about security concerns, suggesting I should have warned him about bringing his expensive car into such a dangerous area. "This is exactly the kind of place where people get carjacked," he announced while frantically checking his doors and windows. He began photographing the building's exterior while muttering about insurance claims and potential vehicle damage, making sure I could hear every comment about the complex's obviously declining condition. When I offered him a larger tip to compensate for his discomfort, Marcus laughed mockingly. "Keep your money, man. You probably need it more than I do, living in a place like this." He pulled out his phone to leave my 1-star review in real time, dictating his complaints about passenger attitude and destination safety while I was still in the vehicle. Everything changed when I pulled out my key fob and used it to access the building's executive entrance, triggering automatic lighting and security systems that recognized my biometric data. Marcus's confident expression faltered as he watched me effortlessly navigate access controls that clearly required ownership-level authorization. His confusion deepened when the building's concierge emerged to greet me by name, discussing property management issues and tomorrow's contractor meetings with obvious deference. "Mr. Johnson, should I validate parking for your guest?" the concierge asked while gesturing toward Marcus's BMW. The driver's face went white as he realized the ghetto resident he'd been lecturing was actually the man whose name appeared on every lease agreement in the 340-unit complex he'd just finished insulting. The aftermath was swift and devastating for Marcus's ride-sharing career. I calmly explained to Uber's customer service that their driver had spent the entire ride making discriminatory comments about my neighborhood while filming me without consent for his alleged podcast. The 1-star review he'd submitted became evidence of bias-motivated service discrimination, leading to immediate account suspension pending investigation. Marcus called 17 times that evening, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails begging me to retract my complaint while revealing he'd quit his day job to drive Uber full-time. The complex's security team, who'd overheard his derogatory comments about the property, compiled footage showing Marcus photographing our building while making disparaging remarks about residents. Within a week, Marcus faced permanent deactivation from all major ride-sharing platforms, while his BMW payments became impossible without steady income. The ghetto apartment complex he'd mocked generated $2.8 million in annual rental revenue, part of a real estate portfolio that employed security guards who now had Marcus's photo with instructions to deny him access to any of my properties across the city.